Hi everyone. I'm very excited today to have Joanne with me from Foothold America. Foothold America is a company that's incorporated in the UK. They assist companies navigate the legal and administrative maze whilst doing business in the US. So Joanne is an American living in the UK, so she knows both sides of the pond very well. I myself have lived in the US and returned back to the UK, so I have some great understanding of both the US and the UK too. And so I certainly understand there's cultural differences. As we set up our UK office with Ellis Porter, we also understood how difficult it can be to transition a company from having a presence in the US to the UK. And that will likely be the similar case for anyone that's in the UK or anywhere in the world looking to open up and do business in the US too. So I think this is a really timely conversation to be having. There's still, despite what's going on in the world with the coronavirus and borders being shut, there's still a huge amount of work that can be done. And I think this is a really good opportunity to utilize some of this time now to really do some good due diligence and lay in the groundwork if you're looking to expand into the US. So Joanne, I'll forward it over to you and to introduce yourself and Foothold America. Then we can jump into some more conversation.
Sure, sounds good. You did a fabulous job introducing me, and it's nice to know we're both bilingual, so we know a few different ways to spell things and say things. But as you said, my name's Joanne Farquharson. I'm the president and CEO of Foothold America. And like Ellis Porter, we are on both sides of the pond. So about half of our employees are in the UK, so we can work with clients in the UK and EU time zones. And then our US staff are on the East Coast, so they can cover the country, but also still be available for our clients in Europe. So,
Right.
And Foothold America has been around since 2014. We were originally a service of our parent company, which is an international life science consulting firm. And they started in the UK, expanded to the US, and realized that there were some challenges with that. And Foothold America became a service to other life science companies. And then we've just grown from there.
Excellent. And now we are in this very odd environment with the coronavirus. Everyone has been impacted on a global scale. From an immigration perspective, we really do require that borders are open for individuals to be able to travel for various companies. But what we've seen is that everyone has adapted, and they've adapted relatively well. And there's a really good opportunity, I think, now for individuals who are looking to take that next step and expand into the US to really utilize this time to hone in on where in the US they may want to incorporate, where they may want to set up their operations, and how they can get operations up and running. And I think traditionally it would have required you sending a core nucleus of individuals from your UK or worldwide operations into the US to kind of be the feet on the ground and get up and running. That may not be the case anymore. And I think Foothold America really offers some fantastic opportunities for individuals to start operating in the US without having to have that core nucleus. And I think everyone has managed to navigate using technology to effectively run operations. So, from being able to virtually onboard new employees, I think is easier than it probably ever has done, and less daunting because everyone's working remotely for most cases. So what's your experience been so far in seeing this transition?
So for our Foothold America employees, the majority of us work remotely, whether that's myself, an internal Foothold employee, or one of our employees that works on behalf of an international client. So from that perspective, not a whole lot of change. Many of our employees are doing business development on behalf of our international clients. So there's lots of flights and mileage in the car, and that for sure has changed. But I think when it comes to UK companies starting businesses in the US, it's important to know that you can still start entities, and immigration processes are still going. But it may, when it comes to certain things like opening a US bank account, where typically you would expect to be seen physically, you'd physically have to come to the US
Right.
and sign a wet signature, things like that. There's certain things that are going to take creativity, say in the banking industry. So we are in the process of dealing with those challenges, but so far I haven't seen that keeping people from their aspirations of going to the US. And for our client base, it's typically tech, life science, those professional services. So the industries that are being challenged right now, hospitality, tourism, things like that. Fortunately for us, that doesn't make up a large part of our client base, but lots and lots of opportunity for some industries. And actually, one thing I have noticed is that we often get calls from potential clients that are ready to move very quickly. So a month or two, they might be looking for a visa or something like that. So I'm sure you get those kind of emergency calls. How quickly can we do this? But I have found that people are looking more for 6 months from now to a year. So they are doing that due diligence and taking things a little bit slower. So I've noticed that.
Yeah, and from an immigration perspective, often where companies say that we've opened up an operation, we didn't think about the immigration aspect of this. We needed somebody there last week. How can we get them there? And when you explain the immigration process and that there could be several weeks or months of delays and processing times, it's often a source of contention because they've got everything up and ready to go, but they need those key employees on the ground in the US, and there's a limit to what we can do in terms of the immigration side. So having that longer runway to get everything up and running and get everything in place really is lending itself very well to this environment right now. And certainly from an immigration perspective, right now there's certain travel bans if you're coming in from Europe in the Schengen area, and also China and Iran. They may be expanded. It's a fluid situation right now. We're in May 2020, and so that could be expanded or contracted over the coming weeks and months. And right now, the US embassies are also closed around the world, which is prohibiting certain immigration visas being issued. However, there is still a lot of work that can be done, similar to opening up businesses. You can still file with the USCIS in the US, and you can still request company registrations through the US embassies. The only issue is you won't be able to get issued the visa until they reopen. But let's jump into this a little bit more. So we're going to be talking predominantly about UK companies entering the US, but this will apply to any company around the world that's looking to move into the US. So if you're a company that's looking to expand into the US, what things can you really be doing right now to maximize this time?
Good question. So you bring up a great point when it comes to a company may have a plan in mind, which is to take a key employee, say from the UK, and they think we've got our company culture, and the only way we can be successful in the US is to imbibe that culture through one of our key employees. So we're going to get that visa and move them there. And that's the way we should expand to the US. And with the timelines that are happening right now, as you said, that's can be a point of contention. But what I have found clients have experienced, and this may help them while the visa process takes a little longer, is that you don't necessarily have to start with that key person from the home country coming over there. A lot of times you can find that US person, at least to kind of get things started until you can So if you've got a contract that says, we need someone on site, and, you have to have the entity, they have to be your employee, you can get those things going while you work on those other pieces. And it forces entrepreneurs to sort of think in a different order.
Right.
But it happens all the time, and not just because of visa pieces. And because of the virtual work that is inevitable with international companies and with COVID, is you start to overcome those barriers that you think are insurmountable. So yes, we can bring this person in the US, an American, into the culture of our company.
Right.
They can represent us by, getting to know each other over Zoom or whatever. You can get over those obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now, the integration is one aspect, but now you've got time to really spend time recruiting US employees as well into those roles, because in pre-COVID era, you may have been up against the timeline and said, look, we've got to get moving on this in a week or 2 weeks. Now it could be, well, let's take a few weeks to really interview individuals, see how they fit into the culture, have virtual interviews with various people in different teams, and see whether they would be that great fit, and do your due diligence from an employee perspective in the US. Now, if you do already have an operation in the US, and you've got employees that are currently there, whether they're US citizens or foreign workers, how are you tackling certain issues with furloughs or changes in terms of employment?
Sure, that's a great question, and it sort of talks back to being bilingual. So here in the UK, the legislation passed to support businesses and workers in the COVID era, and we're using the word furlough. And the same is true in the US, and there's been legislation passed about how those employees can be treated and compensated, and it's different. So when we're speaking with our UK clients and going, okay, well, one of the options is to furlough, or one of the options is to reduce salary if you've got to make changes to your budget, then there's just a different process for what is allowed and how you can do that. So it's just a matter of taking into account the new legislation. So one example that's been important in this era is paid sick leave. So in the US, there's no federal law that says you have to pay sick leave for someone, but individual states may have enacted different laws that say, yes, as an employer, you must offer paid sick leave. So I think there are something like 11 states that have that requirement. And what some of the COVID federal legislation did was require employers to offer paid sick leave during this time. So there are those kinds of changes. And for someone that's used to thinking about regulations and the law in the UK, it's a constant reminder that there's the federal law, and then the states can enact what they want as long as they're not offering less than what the federal government says. So it's having those kinds of conversations to help employers figure out what things they can do compliantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that there's a really nice dynamic with the immigration side, because anytime if you have foreign workers in the US, anytime there's changes to their employment, that would be considered material. So that could be a reduction in their salary, change to their worksite location. Furloughing is a huge issue and shouldn't be undertaken with foreign workers unless they've had an assessment by an immigration professional. But certainly it would require some filings with either the Department of Labor or the USCIS, or both in certain situations. So it really is important, I think, both from a business perspective and from the immigration perspective, to understand how small changes or seemingly small changes could have large impacts from a compliance perspective. And certainly if you're not used to operating in the US, that's certainly something where having a great wealth of experience and state-specific experience is really relevant.
Right, and especially that's why we go to someone like you when it comes to the visa-specific work. But it's very true that there's so many different federal and state government agencies that are intertwined. So there are many unintended consequences when large pieces of legislation that happen quickly without a lot of detail come into play, and you go, okay, well, these are the new rules. And you say, well, no one really thought about how this might impact this person in this immigration situation, or this person who's got a number of part-time jobs or things like that. So in some ways, I don't know if it's felt like this for you, you're a bit in the dark, because clients will ask us questions and we're going to find the answers. And then there's an interim rule that comes out and you go, oh, guess what? It's different today. So yeah, there's a lot of that, detail that takes a little while to come down the pike when there's new legislation.
Let's talk about any businesses in the UK or around the world who are looking to hire US employees. We touched on this before, and I think it's really important. Again, not necessarily having to think, oh, I can only start a business in the US if I move over Tom, John, and Joe from the UK into the US. Hiring a US employee, what would you be telling any of your clients to really focus on during this time?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned having a little bit more time. But it's a buyer's market now for businesses. Unemployment has shot up, so you are going to have your pick of people. Certainly there'll always be those life science people that are highly sought after, and those people will still be a challenge to attract to your company. But so many people are out of work, so you can have plenty of interviews. You can be quite picky. I haven't seen salaries drop yet, so it's not as if you're going to get a talented person at 80% of the cost you would have a few months ago. And I guess time will tell if that's the case. But one thing a lot of UK businesses aren't aware of is that you can hire a US employee without having a US entity, without having a US bank account. And we have a model where that's the case. Essentially, we're taking on all of the burden, or other organizations like ours take on the burden for the international company and pay the employee compliantly, provide the benefits, all of those kinds of things. So that's a model that's available to UK businesses and international businesses that they might not be aware of, because very often it's the first step is I need an entity, I need a visa to get things going, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So,
and I think that model maybe really suits somebody again who's very new to the US business model, in that there are differences paying 401ks, whether you need to pay health insurance, and so unless you've got a great guidance or professional that you're working with, having an operation like that where you have that management service where you can hire US employees without necessarily the overhead and liability requirement would seem like a brilliant option, and matched with the opportunity to do diligence to see where you want to operate as well. And that's something that I also just wanted to touch on, because we've seen it where our US offices are headquartered in Detroit, Michigan, which often gets quite a colorful, colorful report on the media outlets.
Right, great town.
Of the US, great history there. And what we've seen over probably the past 8 to 10 years is there's a huge resurgence in Detroit itself. Companies really love coming there. Young startups love it because it's got a great story. Cost of living is much lower, and a lot of individuals have realized you don't need to be in New York, Silicon Valley, California, or Boston to really have that power and that potential. We're seeing others, smaller cities like Detroit, Atlanta, Austin, kind of butt up. And so I think for anyone looking to expand to the US, now's a great time to touch base with Chamber of Commerce's in smaller cities, see what options are available, see what government grants may be available, and see what's going on, see what the infrastructure is. I know Detroit and Atlanta are becoming hotbeds for fintech companies. Mm-hmm. For any UK fintech companies that are looking to expand, maybe you don't have to be in New York or Chicago. Maybe you can be in these smaller regional towns and still get these great talented individuals in the US to help operate there.
It is so true. I can't tell you how often I have that conversation, because it's Boston, New York, San Diego, and that's it. And there are talent pools, just like you said, hubs that are outside of those primary areas. And as many people are going to be doing business development, you really just need a solid airport near where you live. Right. And one example of this, just using minimum wage as an example, the federal minimum wage is $7.25. And as I said, with state laws, they can offer something more, they just can't offer something less. So North Carolina, for example, is also $7.25 minimum wage, but Massachusetts is 14, and California, I think, is just shy of 13. So it's important to look for, who is the talent, who are the talent that you need, and where are the hubs, so you can tie into different universities. But it's worth exploring, especially for a young company that doesn't have deep pockets or massive funding. It makes sense for us to be in Florida. And as you said, there are chambers of commerces, and there are also chambers of commerce. There are many of those organizations, those municipalities that have offices in London. So Enterprise Florida, for example, has London representation, and they're wanting to get the word out, the tax incentives that they can provide, the talent pools, the cost of office space, although who does office space anymore? So yeah, there are lots of opportunities there, and looking into tax breaks and things like that. It's time well spent instead of just the default cities.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to quickly wrap this up. If you were going to, let's say, have 2 or 3 pointers for any clients or potential companies looking to expand to the US, what would you be suggesting right now?
Oh, gosh. So if I make the assumption that the company does want to go to the US, because some companies may be pulling back right now because of what's going on economically. So if a company has decided, yes, this is the right time, or yes, we're going to continue to move forward, it's about finding the right advice. So tax advice, legal advice, and then if you are employing people, it's such there's so many potential pitfalls with that, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You're an entrepreneur, right. You have business to do. You want to stay focused as you enter a new market. So let people help you, and do those pieces so you don't make mistakes early on that you'll catch a year or two later, or the IRS will catch a year or two later, and then right. You go, wow, if we had only known. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know, so you don't even exactly know the questions to ask. Yeah. And having someone show you through, at least till you get your feet on the ground, is what I would recommend in the US, or really any country where someone's expanding.
Perfect. Yeah, I've been turned on to listening to Gary Vaynerchuk. So anyone that's watching, he often says there's no bad time to start a good business, and I think that's perfectly true even in this current environment that we're operating in. But Joanne, I'd love to thank you for your time. I think you've given us some great information. Anyone that is looking to expand to the US, Foothold America, I think, is a great place to start. And really love this conversation. I think I could talk about this all day. So thank you very much for your time today.